Hello, good morning. Thank you all very much for coming back as well. It was a bit of a tight squeeze at the start. I see, we've got some cheap seats at the very back. Perhaps we can have a swap around later on. I wanted to talk about digital advertising and the internet in general through the lens of a meme popularised on Twitter. You may have heard of it. It's called How It Started, How It's Going. Show of hands, who's heard of that meme, used that meme? Yeah, no one would guess we all work in digital advertising. And I thought it would be mega interesting because, one, when you get into the substance of how things started, you start to learn some really interesting things. So one thing that you learn is the intention behind something when it starts. And you also start to learn how well it goes sort of further in the distance when you get into how it's going now. Or perhaps, as we'll find out, when it doesn't go so well. I want to get everyone on the same page before we start in terms of how the meme works. So here's one of my favourite ones. This is ex-Prime Minister Theresa May. We all remember Theresa May. My God, quick tangent. I would give my left arm to have the cold but steady hand of Theresa May at the wheel of the country now. But never mind, that's for another conference. Here's how it started for Theresa May. Dancing Queen at the Conservative Party conference. All good, all good. We kind of know how it ended. Not so well for her. So that's the kind of premise of it. Here's one which is a bit more about me.
The library staff know these buildings inside out, so there'll always be someone on hand to help you find that obscure article.
Both in the libraries and around campus, the university is well served by the latest computing facilities. Over 700 PCs are available, most with free 24-hour access.
So that's me in... What's funny? So that's me in 20 years ago, would you believe it, in 2002, when the University of Wales Aberystwyth, which is where I attended, produced the first ever CD-ROM for their prospectus. I kind of think I've been sort of cutting edge since then. So on camera 20 years ago, wearing some stripes, talking about computers. This is 2002, this is our upfronts from last year. On camera, wearing some stripes, kind of still talking about computers. My father-in-law had to put me on his car insurance last year, and you have to get, for some reason, you have to get occupation if you're going to put someone on your car insurance. And they asked him on the phone, what does your son-in-law do? And he said, yeah, he works in computers. So it's like all done, almost there. We all do. We all one big computer family. If you go back even further, you've heard from this guy already, stood over there in the corner. This is John Mew. So this is John Mew, how it started when he joined the IAB. In about 2013, he was the first head of mobile for the IAB. This is at a time when smartphones were exploding. How it's going? Pretty well, thank you. CEO within 10 years. So John Mew doing exceptionally well there. If you come back even further and look at the IAB, this guy is an incredible guy. This is the godfather of the IAB, a guy called Danny Meadows-Clue. He founded IAB UK. As you can see, he's an exceptionally sharp dresser, very handsome man, actually. When they polled people and said, who is the most attractive IAB UK CEO in history, he came top. But he's a real thought leader, real kind of inspiration, and we probably wouldn't be in this room without the likes of Danny Meadows-Clue. So that's how it started. Let's have a look how it's going. So different. I mean, the internet and digital advertising looks very different now. The perhaps it did when Danny Meadows-Clue there. You kind of get how the meme works, so that's good. I've categorised the meme into three areas for this presentation. One is thinking about some of those moments where it's maybe fairly obvious or it's maybe a little bit smug, how it started, how it's ended up. There's a couple of wow moments in there as well. And then the third, I want to talk about unintended consequences. When you start something, you have lots of intentions for it, but perhaps it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. So here's the first one. This is a page in the Daily Mail, December the 5th, 2000. The internet may just be a passing fad as millions give up on it. Fast forward. I mean, these are the numbers from the half year last year, because they were so embargoed, the numbers that John shared with you this morning. And you can see that it is absolutely massive, has overtaken the 20 billion mark in the UK. So for a passing fad, I don't think we're doing bad as an industry. Anyone subscribed to Popular Mechanics back in 1997? Very popular magazine by the sounds of things. The death of the internet. Clogged up, bogged down and gridlocked. Can the net be saved before it screeches to a halt? When you go to Giphy and you look at internet consumption, this is what it shows you. If you look at our own real living research, which looked at people and how they behaved with their digital devices during lockdown, people are using them more than ever. There's like this 18-hour window every day now for advertisers to target people. Ofcom's own stats on lockdown, they're saying that 94% of the population have access to the internet. 3.5 hours on average is how long we're online, which is obviously even bigger when you look at age groups like 16 to 24. So much exaggerated depth of the internet there. This is an actual slide that 2013 John Mew, head of mobile at the IAB, used to take out. Why bother with mobile? When I do a TV campaign, I know exactly how much I sell. You can't do that on mobile. Unnamed drunk media buyer, maybe in this room now. Could be a bit embarrassing. And again, these are last year's numbers, so they're even bigger. Even if telly had a big fit of growth last year, mobile alone, which now makes up 60% of all digital, is double how much money gets put into telly. Incredible. This is a bit more recent in the news. This guy, Mr. Hastings, who is CEO of Netflix, very famously has always said, we're not going to take ads, not interested in taking ads on Netflix. And he's been quite disparaging of advertising, actually. Felt like it was a little bit corrupt, it was a bit dirty, didn't really want to go anywhere near that. He said they had a much simpler business model, which was a subscription model. And he didn't really like what they were doing with people's data. So he's sort of doing lots of finger pointing. That's kind of how it started. We all kind of know how it's going because it's been in the news. In that a not so good earnings call has meant that they're going to have to look at advertising as a model. They just can't sustain this idea that people are going to pay £10 a month because, of course, the price has gone up as well. I was listening to Radio 1, millennial, just about, and on Newsbeat, they were out in the street doing Vox Pops with people, and they were talking about this, and they were saying, well, how do you feel about this clampdown on sharing user IDs amongst households? And young people, like you, were outraged at this. And they said, well, maybe we can't afford the £9.99 a month. And I swear to you, one girl said, why don't they just put ads on there so they can make it free? It's like, I just want to take that and just put it in every single presentation. And she's bang on. He might not love the idea that comes with ads. He might not agree with the way that we do everything, but it's a perfectly capable, sustainable model which keeps the best things we love about the internet free, which I think is really, really important. He wasn't the first, though. This is Jonah Peretti, CEO and founder of BuzzFeed. And Jonah was he was described as being one of the biggest holdouts of programmatic advertising. He really didn't like it, didn't like the idea of banner advertising. And in a way, I kind of admired him. He talked a lot about magazine advertising. And he said, if you pick up something like Vogue and you open those few front pages and there's these incredible Louis Vuitton and Chanel, like the ads are as good as the content, if not better. They're like the editorial. They're really additive to the experience. And he said, if you look at online with all these banners and buttons, it sort of detracts from what you're doing. So I think it's a very admirable vision that he had. Of course, couldn't sustain it either. And actually, that in the end, I think for shareholders, they had to go and say, well, look, over here is this sort of incredible industry and ecosystem which works really well. Buyers want to buy it, advertisers buy into it, and we're gonna have to do it. I wanted to get into a little bit of a wow moment now. This guy here, we talked about the godfather of the IAB, Danny Meadows-Clue. This is the godfather of mobile, a guy called Russell Buckley. And he very famously sold his mobile ad network called AdMob to Google before Google got into mobile advertising, believe it or not. He's this incredibly knowledgeable guy. This is him talking at Mindshare's Huddle back in 2013.
In 2035, if you take the last 25 years and apply it to the next 25 years of technology, a mobile phone as we know it today will be the size of a red blood cell and 1 billion times more powerful. And so I made a joke about his computer from 2035 because you can't actually see it.
Now, Russell Buckley is an incredibly, incredibly smart guy. But what he's doing there is just applying logic. He's saying that if you think about Moore's law, so Moore's law is the idea that you can get more transistors onto a microchip as time goes by. You can get more and more, but at the same time, the price of computing comes down. So he's just playing that out. He's thinking about how things grow exponentially. They're very, very small at the start, but suddenly they get bigger and bigger. Think about those ad spend charts that John was showing earlier. And if you look at it, the ingestible sensor market is absolutely huge. Is that time? Someone ringing the bell for time. I've got a little bit left. It's going to be worth $3 billion in 2030. So perhaps we're not at the point where the mobile phone is as small as a red blood cell. Perhaps it's not billions of times faster, but there's this incredible industry that's on a completely different horizon than perhaps we're thinking about it. And it reminded me of this brilliant quote from Bill Gates, of course, co-founder of Microsoft. We always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will happen in the next 10. So if you think 10 years on, we're talking about 2032. How many people in your business do you think you've got thinking about 2032? Because I think as an industry, we're hardwired to think in quarters. We've either got to deliver a sales target, we've got to deliver a plan, and it's not really until we get to October where we might spend a month or two just thinking about the next year. So we're thinking in a year horizon. And in that time, if you believe Bill Gates, we're overestimating loads of stuff. Probably did that with things like AR and VR and QR codes and all those other things. I challenge you to go away and think about who in your business, who are the people thinking in that 10-year time frame, and then get them to think even bigger, because we underestimate it as humans, I think is an incredibly important thing. I just wanted to finish and talk about some unintended consequence, again, through this meme of how things started and how they were going. The cookie notice for me is probably the best example. In coming up with an idea of we should ask people if it's okay to drop these pieces of code on their computer so we can understand what they're doing online. Perfectly sensible. So we'll do that. We'll put a little pop-up up and we'll ask people and they'll say yes. Theoretically, it sounds like a brilliant, brilliant idea. When that starts happening everywhere, it becomes a bit more problematic. So this is something that was written in Recode. These pop-up cookie notices all over the internet are well-meaning, they're well-intentioned, right? And supposed to promote transparency about your online privacy. But in the end, they're not doing much. Most of us just tediously click yes and move on. They're not too different from the annoying pop-up ads we all ignore when we're online. So there is no way in this world, when the people were in a room thinking about how we can get privacy right online, that they thought this would be the end result. But unfortunately it is. We just ignore these things. Who went through and said, actually, I'm going to pick which cookies are allowed to drop on my machine, and I'll go. Maybe some people did, because obviously we work in it. But it's an unintended consequence of a really, really good idea. So we have to mind out with these things. Anyone know who this guy is? 1989, Sir Tim Berners-Lee. We wouldn't be in this room if not for Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He founded the World Wide Web. And really interesting, if you go back to the roots of it, it was founded on simplicity. He thought that to make something global, you needed as many people across the world as possible to be able to build into this thing. In fact, it was so simple. In 1989, he wrote a paper for a very well-established conference, and they rejected the paper, which talked about the beginnings of the internet, because it was just too simple. No one thought it could be this simple. So in terms of the web, it started as this very simple, very straightforward idea that everyone can collaborate on. And I wonder if we look at it now, it feels a little bit like this. Particularly we get into the mechanic that makes the things we love about the internet, the content, the services all free, which of course is advertising and why we're in the room today. And there's a little bit of this going on. Partly, I feel like we might have complicated it for complication's sake. There's all sorts of interesting things going on. I mean, these are, 15 acronyms that you may or may not know. They feel needlessly complicated. It's okay for the back end to be very complex. We're not pretending we should go back to picking up the phone to a media owner and booking the media and going off to lunch. We're not saying that. We're saying that programmatic is great and it's had incredible efficiencies. It's made things work harder. But the way we talk about it might actually be putting a bit of distance between us and the people that are buying it, the advertisers, the ones with the money. It might actually be putting a fair amount of distance between us, the experts, and the policymakers and the regulators, who ultimately are going to have a big say on our industry in the next couple of years. Don't come at me, out-of-home fans. Out-of-home fans, weird. It's just a job. The idea that you had outdoor media, that we changed to out-of-home, OOH, I'm all right with that. DOOH, digital out-of-home, kind of all right with that. But when it becomes programmatic and we put a lowercase p in front of it to kind of say it, like, what's next? Like, how long is this acronym going to get? So it's slightly playful, but it's an unintended consequence. We haven't really thought through how accessible is that to someone whose first week is in digital advertising. You have to sort of explain it. So I think we can make things simpler. And here's what's happening. Here's how we think it's going. Pretty smug. I think it's going pretty well. Ad spend numbers look pretty good. Here's how advertisers feel. They feel like digital advertising is this kind of runaway buggy that they can't quite catch. Every time they do, it goes faster and faster. all we talk about, I've done it on stages like this for years. We've talked about the pace of change and how exciting it is. And we've talked about the metaverse, and we've talked about VR and AR, how amazing it's going to be, all thinking that people are getting excited by that. And actually what's happening, the research, big research that we've done at the moment, is saying that advertisers are saying it's kind of too much. It's having the opposite effect. I know I need to do digital advertising, but I would actually enjoy it more. I would get more into it if I actually understood it. But we're putting barriers in the way, like acronyms, and making things far too complicated for something that started, and the intention was for it to be so easy. And it reminded me of this brilliant, if you've seen the film Margin Call, which is about a different sort of very complex ecosystem around trading. It reminded me of this quote from here.
I'd like to speak with the analyst who seems to stumble across this mess.
Certainly. That would be Peter Sullivan, right here.
Oh, Mr. Sullivan, you're here. Good morning. Maybe you could tell me what you think is going on here. And please, speak as you might to a young child or a golden retriever. It wasn't brains that got me here, I can assure you of that.
So it feels like a nice lesson, sort of talk to people over, but he's right. Like, he's in this world that's incredibly complex and sophisticated, but it doesn't mean that when we tell him, we have to tell him in a really complicated way. So my urge to you is to try and make things more simple. We should be really, really clear, though, that complexity doesn't mean murky. And I think lots of the critics of digital advertising come across this word murky and opaque, and it's not really transparent. I think it's more about sophistication. If you think about intellectual property law, if you think about quantum, teleportation, they're really complicated things, probably more complicated than our world. No one's saying those things are murky because they're incredibly sophisticated, and the people that are specialists in them can talk to you about them in a really, really simple way. 4 things to take away then. Be careful what you write off. You don't want to be the Daily Mail, very valued member of the IAB in 2000. Probably got that one wrong. Certainly wasn't a fad. Think about this kind of, we overestimate in 2 years, we underestimate in 10 years. I think this is so important as we start to think about what the internet's going to look like in the metaverse. What's that going to be like? I mean, most of us are probably thinking about how we're going to deliver Q2, Q3, but you need some thinkers in your business thinking about this 10-year outlook, and don't underestimate it. Stuff has consequences. As well-intended as we try and be, sometimes it doesn't quite go to plan. So I think when you set things up, make sure you're really, really clear about the impact that it's going to have. Explain things like you would to a golden retriever, and always have that runaway buggy image implanted in your mind, because that's how advertisers are telling us they feel about digital advertising. We've got to make it more simple for them, for policymakers, for regulators. Thank you very, very much.